Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. Before we start, I would like to tell you sorry for my voice, I have a cold. And the most important updates are coming from Russia, probably because according to information we have, the Russians and Putin's approved the big military spendings hikes for Russia's budget, and the Russians are planning to spend around 30% of the budget for the next year. A few weeks ago we got the same update from Ukraine that they're also planning to increase the military spendings. So obviously either the Russians and the Ukrainians are getting ready and prepare themselves for the next year and for the next war in the next year. Obviously, I think that probably 2024 is going to be the most important year when we're going to receive some break on the ground, and somebody, either the Russians or the Ukrainians, will show the progress, and maybe even more territories will be captured from the territory from Ukraine. Furthermore, we got some updates from Kiev. According to information we have, Zelensky continue pressing and pushing Zaluzhny. Basically, Zaluzhny controls the entire military forces in Ukraine. And as I understand, Zelensky are forced to start presidential elections, and he doesn't want to start them until he removes Zaluzhny from the political ground. And obviously, the Ukrainians will make elections, but before that, Zelensky will try to remove or even blame and make some warranty against Zaluzhny, and to capture him and put him into prison. As the main thing that Zelensky wants to blame Zaluzhny for is that the problem and the situation in Kherson in 2022. We remember that the Russians attacked Ukraine from different directions. The first attack took place from Belarus, another one from Bryansk and Kursk area in direction of Kiev, and the most powerful and the most successful attack took place from Crimea. And there were no defense. There were no problems for the Russians to bypass significant territories, and this is the reason. This is exactly the situation that Zelensky wants to blame Zaluzhny for. So he's trying to say that Zaluzhny is a traitor, and basically the situation in Crimea was made by him or something like this, or was made because of any absence of his activity and his anything from this direction. Furthermore, during the previous night, the Russians made another massive attack all over the entire Ukraine using drones and so on. Now we are moving to the southern area, to Crimea, to Odessa and so on. We also got very interesting updates from this territory. First of all, very interesting updates are coming from Odessa. The Ukrainian sources are saying, and there is lots of Telegram channels in this area, and there is lots of messages asking people not to walk out. These messages mainly is related to the man. The local sources ask men not to walk on the streets because during the nights the Ukrainian authorities took a decision to increase the mobilization process in this area, and everybody who walks at night will be captured and moved to the recruiting centers. The Russians published also very interesting details and a very interesting update that we were been expecting probably since the beginning of the special military operation. The Russians provided their first experimental designs, or maybe even not experimental but already some in production of them. This is the Navy drones. The Navy drones, something that the Russians are trying to show to the Ukrainian Navy drones that currently establish a very powerful control over the Black Sea. So obviously the 2024 year is also going to be the battle between Navy drones in the Black Sea. The Russians will try to replace their main fleet in the next year with Navy drones, and they will try to restore complete control in the next year, and obviously the Russians will try to complete the question of Odessa. Furthermore, these Navy drones can be used by the Russians for demining process, which will also allow the Russians to start landing operation if they ever plan to do this in Odessa region. Now we are moving to the situation on the ground, and the weather is getting better, and as you can see, as soon as the weather got better, the Russians start actively bombing or continue or renew their bombardments of Krynki using Fa-500. For example, on this video we see Krynki. The Krynki has been already reduced to ruins. There are no buildings that is correct, everything was destroyed, and this is the Russian tactics. The Russians blocked the Ukrainians from the south, from the west, from the east, and they're not allowing them to move further river, and they're trying to hold them in this bridgehead while they're bombing this territory with FAB 500, FAB 1500. And obviously the Ukrainians have just one option: to leave this territory. The Russians don't want to storm this area. They don't want to start these useless assault operations because they're gonna have losses. The Russians try to solve the issue of Krinky frontline using FPV drones and FAB 500 and FAB 1500. So we'll see, but obviously the days of Ukrainians in this area are numbered. The only thing they can do is to let's say collect their forces in one fist and to attack the Russians in the forest. But the Russians are saying that currently there are around 300 or 400 soldiers of Ukraine army in this area, and this is exactly territory, the foothold that Ukrainians control, and the Russians always are pushing from every single direction. The Ukrainians from their side published two videos. One of them took place in Pyschanovka. On this video we see how the Ukrainians tried to suppress the Russian probably air machine gun position or sniper position as a result with using the FPV drones. So we see that Ukrainians do still have some plans to create some foothold, but before that, first the Ukrainians need to clear the territory between, let's say, the river islands and Pyschanovka. And the same story we got from Gola Pristin. On this video we see how the Ukrainians managed to discover the Russian FPV drone position. We see the Russian soldier who was trying to start FPV attack. The Ukrainians discovered, and as a result of Ukrainian FPV drone strike, half of the building was destroyed till ruins. So very powerful FPV drone strikes they were. Now we are moving to Zaporozhye area. We got some updates from this territory as well, and the most important that is the Russians started counteroffensive operations, a small counteroffensive operation along the let's say the border or along the edge positions of the Ukrainians among the tree lines on the western part, on the southwestern part of Rabotina, or from the southern direction. So the Russians are using small squads, small platoons, 10-50 soldiers, 10-15 soldiers, and they're attacking with the small groups with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to step back. I'm not saying that the Russians are planning to return control over entire Rabotina, but something like this might happen during the next weeks. Or maybe the Russians are trying to test the Ukrainians' defense, because I'll remind you that during the previous days, the Ukrainians have redeployed 116th Brigade from Rabotina. Currently, this brigade is located in Dnipro for regrouping, but some sources have already reported that the 116th Brigade has been already mentioned and spotted in Avdiivka direction. So obviously all these redeployments from Rabotina reduce the Ukrainian possibilities, and now the Russians just want to test whether the Ukrainians are able to hold Rabotina or not. Now we are moving to Vremivka tactical bridgehead. As we know, the Russians continue advancing along these three lines in direction of Staromayorsk. The Russians are taking more and more positions. They're forcing the Ukrainians to step back from this line. And the most important thing is that currently the Ukrainians, there is just one hill left under Ukraine control. And I'm talking about this territory. This is the hill. This is the hill, and after this hill there is lowlands along the Mokry Yala River. The Russians published some topographic map. You see this blue square, and this is the square of the hill, the last hill that is still under Ukraine control. And now the Russians are trying to storm this area. So this is the area, and if the Russians can take, then they will be able to see everything in front of them in the area that's located in this Mokry Yala. So this territory will be under complete Russian fire control, coordination control, navigation control, and the Russians obviously after taking control over this hill, the days of Staromayorsk will be numbered. Now we are moving further to Avdiivka area. We got a lot of interesting details and updates, and the most important are coming from every single direction. There are three directions, as we discussed, of Russian offensive operation. Probably the northern one will be split in two parts in some time, but for now there is also one direction. From the southern one, according to some mappers, the Russians managed to establish control over another tree line that located on the southern Severna. Yet we haven't received even a single geolocation of Russian control over this square. So, but I'm note this update because it's important, because as soon as the Russians are able to establish control over this foothold, over these territories, obviously the days of Severna will be counted, will be numbered, and they're going to maybe a few days or a week, and this village will be taken by the Russians. When talking about southern direction, the Russians start publishing updates about the FPV drone strikes against the last residential area on the southern part of Avdiivka. This is important stronghold that if the Russians are able to take control over this territory, this foothold will open the Russian the way in direction of Tsarskaya Okhota fortification. And now the Russians started to launch the first phase of storm, and the first phase of storm usually is FPV drone strikes. After that, the Russians will bombard this territory, and then they're going to be the situation operation on the ground. So now this area is under Russian focus. Very difficult to understand which direction the Russians are going to use to attack, but as I understand, the Russians are going to attack from the north, because the Ukrainians, when they were building the fortifications in this area, they didn't expect that the Russians will attack them from the north. So basically this is the best solution for the Russians to attack, and obviously the days of this fortification area are also numbered, and this field, this area will open the Russian the gates and the further pass in direction of Tsarskaya Okhota, and this is like the Russians' plans for the next 2 or maybe 2 weeks, not more, because the days also of offensive operation of Avdiivka are numbered. The Russians can't attack like years in this direction. The president's elections are in March, so that's why they need to complete the entire Avdiivka operation probably by the beginning of March or something like this. And the Ukrainians also from their side published the videos of FPV drone strike against the Russian positions in industrial area. This very important line, and the Ukrainians understand that they can't defeat or repel the Russians' attacks. The only thing they can do is to slow down the Russians, and now that's why they're attacking the Russian positions with FPV drones. And this video is very important because from this video we understand that the Russians still haven't managed to establish the electronic warfare equipment to suppress the drones. So basically the Russian forces in this area are at a very heavy risk to be attacked by the Ukrainians' FPV drones. When talking about northern direction, as we discussed, the Russians were forced to step back from the eastern part of Stepova. The Ukrainians published more videos. For example, a few days ago we saw the video from this area, and during that video there was just one armored vehicle of Russian forces in this area. During the previous few days the Russians managed to move another armored vehicle. See, we saw just this one. Now the Russians moved another armored vehicle, and the Ukrainians basically destroyed this vehicle with FPV drone. There are no Ukrainian positions in the eastern part, and there are no Russian positions as well. Basically the Russians are sitting along this line. And the Russians first of all took a decision to change their focus and to continue movements to the north in direction of Cheretina. And we have geolocated video of Russian storming operation in the trenches. The Russians were attacking this territory with storm squad, and as a result of clashes they managed to establish control over the tree line along the railways and to clear this area and to dig in deeper. So we have a geolocated video of the Russian progress further to the north. Of course it's a very risky operation, but who knows, maybe the Russians are planning to establish control first of all over this territory. This is very risky, but there is a residential area where the Russians are able to dig in deeper, and obviously this territory is located on the hill, and from this territory the Russians will be able to establish complete fire control over the roads that located around this residential area. Of course the Russians will be under fire as well of different types of artillery, and the Russians artillery forces will not be able to support their defenders in this area, but who knows, maybe the Russians have some crazy plans, so we'll see. Anyway, when talking about this direction, currently we see that the main Russian focus lays exactly in this small area, small triangle between the railways. So we'll see what the Russians are planning to do next. Now we are moving to Avdiivka, to Bakhmut Artyomov's direction. We got a lot of updates from the fields and the railways and the tree lines between Dubovo, Vasilievka, Bogdanovka and Khromovo. The Russians managed to adjust the combat line, managed to shorten their positions, and basically there are very heavy clashes inside of Khromovo. Or maybe not clashes, but something like clearing operation, because the Ukrainians, when they were withdrawing their position, left some rearguard forces, and now maybe there are clashes with them. There are a lot of mines, surprises and traps and so on. And also the Russians published the first geolocated video of their offensive operation from the Berkhovka water reservoir in direction of these three lines and so on. On this video we see massive Russian attack that involved a significant number of armored vehicles and infantry. The Russians, as you can see, didn't face any counter-artillery bombardments. 1, 2, 3, 4 armored vehicles were moving here. The Russians were moving along the three lines. Then they managed to reach the first the railways. They landed their infantry. On this video we see how the Russians were trying to bomb and attack the Ukrainian positions on the next tree line, the area where the Ukrainians were keeping some operational reserves. The Ukrainians basically haven't managed to send reinforcement, and this tree line was captured by the Russians. According to this video, according to the weather, I think that this event took place maybe even like 2 or 3 days ago, maybe before the biggest storm. Anyway, this is the geolocation confirmation of the Russian progress and Russian complete control over this territory. Obviously, during the previous few days, the Russians were trying to dig in deeper to short and maintain the foothold, and now they're completely ready for further offensive operation in direction along the tree lines and in direction of Bogdanovka. So obviously the clashes will continue, and obviously the Russians will be able to improve their foothold in their favor, and the Ukrainians, as you can see from on this area, are able just to step back. Now we are moving to the north, and we have also some updates from Kupiansk-Liman. The main updates are coming from Liman area. I have updated the map in Sinkovka according to the videos of clashes in the northern part of this village, and the Ukrainians also published the video. We see some snow on the ground. That means that the video is this is very recent footage, and on this video we see how the Ukrainians destroyed 3 Russian tanks. The forces of 14th Mechanized Brigade of Ukrainian forces destroyed 3 Russian tanks, and as you can see, the Russians lost 3 tanks in a very deep rear according to the combat line, because the recent footage that we saw yesterday, day before yesterday, those days, shown us the Russian progress and the Russian activity along this red line, and now we see that 3 Russian tanks during this snow period of time were destroyed in a deep rear, almost on the line, on the road between Pershatravnevo and Vilshana. And this is very important, because from this video it's very difficult to understand whether the Ukrainians were using FPV drones for destroyed, or maybe anti-tank missiles, or maybe tank strikes. Anyway, something happens in this area, and maybe not in Russian favor. So we need more details and more information to understand the real positions of the forces, either the Russians and the Ukrainians, on this direction. And that's it for this short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.